When you think secret society, you probably think clandestine dealings, robed figures, candlelight and chanted Latin. But in all honesty, I think this is a rather weak notion, and a bit of a strange aesthetic to latch onto. It's very cultically coded, very Christian coded, and I think we can often get too caught up in this sense of a clandestine aesthetic, and forget the fact that secrecy is a primary concern of any secret society. Now, it must be noted that there are many types of secret societies, at all scales, all scopes, and with all sorts of intentions, and all sorts of levels of influence. So today, what I want to do is highlight 3 broad scopes of secret society that we can discuss, from absolutely universally massive to the very smallest of clandestine companies. Because there are learnings in all of these different scopes of secret societies that will make our versions feel more realistic, more dynamic, and more mysterious for far, far longer. To start with, I want to present the largest possible scope of a secret society, a multiversal one. Often, it is incredibly hard to pitch one of these correctly. If your series revolves around fighting against such a power, say, the Loki TV series, it often boils down to find the boss, beat the boss, and everything else should fall apart. Now, I know Season 2 does subvert this trope quite significantly, but it's still a pretty solid example. Yet you do also struggle with the fundamental question of how on Earth, or on many Earths, is all this kept secret? And of course, once it's not all secret anymore to your audience or to your protagonists, where does your story go from there? You can't really take any step beyond a secret society that influences every aspect of conceivable reality. Frankly, I find stories which pitch themselves as our protagonists needing to stand up against all odds, against some shadowy organisation that controls literally anything. Not just one sector of business or one nation, but the entire known world, or even multiverse. They can only end, really, in 2 ways. The unrealistic way, or an eventual tragic reinforcement of the weight of influence that a shadowy overseer can bring to bear, with the re-establishment of the shadowy organisation's dominance and the usually ironic crushing of our hero's spirits. There's just a certain point of shadow influence, past which no ragtag group of heroes or even small militia can hope to stand a chance. Or at least stand a chance to effect significant lasting change. There is another way to engage with a massive shadowy organisation, one which has been working in many stories for many, many years. Don't fight the power. Assuming your choices are a futile fight to make some small systemic change after countless sacrifices on your side, or taking down some bloated shadow superpower against all odds, or with the magic power that nobody expected. Between those 2 poles, the most narratively satisfying choice you can often make, assuming especially that you're using a media which values player choice and player input, is to use the multiversal or international or broad shadowy organisation as an impetus to adventure. Men in Black has historically, as a franchise, tended to shy away from intra-agency conflict. Other than the odd rogue agent, we're not trying to dismantle the systemic power of the Men in Black organisation, we're working within its strictures to do cool things. Especially for a game, the secret society can be a foundational conceit, a grounding upon which to place the story in. One project that I think exemplifies this specific approach is today's sponsor, Enclave. And don't skip this one, genuinely. If you're into TTRPGs, or even considering being into TTRPGs, this is where you want to be. Enclave is an episodic game, with the conceit being that you are a fireteam of agents sent out by the mysterious multiversal Enclave organisation, a shadowy one whose goals and motivations are even far beyond their operators' concern, or frankly beyond their day-to-day reality of missions, monsters, artifacts and ancient secrets. The existence of this multiversal enclave that can send its agents wherever, whenever, is essentially justifying grounds for a game that has a broad scope, has a scope of every conceivable world, every potential setting, genre, tech level, anything you can really imagine. This shadowy organisation will send you there and give you a narrative goal for the mission. What I personally really genuinely love about this game, which is now on its first major expansion with Enclave Aspirant, is how focused it is on creating a pure, imaginative, collaborative experience. Every session could be a one-shot of a completely different genre, or part of something more grand. And none of it needs any resources other than the core book. No dice, no encounter tables, no stat blocks, hell, you don't even need a table. It is a distillation of all the imaginative elements of TTRPGs without the work that TTRPGs tend to make you do. Please do check out their Kickstarter, linked in the description and the pinned comment. Robbie, the systems creator, is genuinely a lovely guy, and the system does just work. Plus, for our purposes today, it's kind of a perfect example of how to use a shadowy organisation to create a basis for fantasies that aren't just this kind of desperate revolutionism. And you've only got less than 2 weeks to get in on the action. Head over there, please. Look, the thing that really bugs me about the way that we always make media with a secret society is that no matter how much you may want to make your characters part of this secret society, doing cool stuff, going on cool missions, just like we discussed, eventually you end up with that cool secret society being overtaken by a broodier, more shadowy overlord, or being corrupted from within by some rogue element, which sets the secret society on a clashing path with our protagonist or protagonists. James Bond's MI6, Kingsman, Cerberus in Mass Effect, the Assassin's Brotherhood, just to name a few. These are large organisations who operate in the shadows on national or multi-system cases, all of whom employ the protagonist, and all of whom the protagonist must investigate and usually, eventually, dismantle corrupt elements and stop the very plans that they were themselves furthering as an agent. Don't get me wrong, it is a solid system for storytelling and creates instant tension, and it does work quite well for large-scale secret organisations who aren't in total control of absolutely everything, but have a massively broad influence nonetheless. Using this trope for a secret council puppeteering all beings in all realities is, I would argue, a little bit much. The trouble is, in many of these cases, I just think we're looking at these internal agency conflicts through entirely the wrong lens. As much as we're a cynical people, as humans in general, when given the choice, we do prefer to believe in systems. This is partly because it's easier to function in society if you believe that that society is broadly fair. And when it isn't fair, it's easier to believe that it's not the system itself that is broken, it's some bad actors who are ruining everything. This very common thought process is the background behind immigration alarmism, political scapegoating and violence, and it's even behind many of the imagined secret societies people have dreamed up since time immemorial, like the Illuminati or a beggar king and his court as a collection of pickpockets in Victorian England. This narrative is a simple one, and it feels safer to blame systemic issues on someone or a group of someones who are ruining everything, and to see expelling or exposing those someones as a way to fix what's wrong. It's easier to do that than to examine the issues in an intersectional sense, and examine if systemic truths about how most people act or implicit biases in a system should be held responsible for the actions of said system instead. What this all boils down to in our fiction is an insistence that the big shadowy organisation is either responsible for every awful and tragic thing that happens throughout the tale to everyone, or it's been corrupted and twisted by a rogue element who are spoiling the whole organisation. Or sometimes it's both. We want an accessible, direct fix and someone to blame. It's just human nature. But it's not terribly plausible. New religious movements, which are, I would say, the closest analogue to the secret society as perceived in fiction, they do tend to begin with an ideology pushed by a single charismatic leader. But it is very rare for these movements to retain this single glorious leader aesthetic when they reach a large enough scale and have been around for a long enough time. At the point in which these groups become massive, they are instead ruled by social mores and ritual actions that have been made part of the group's routine. So yes, secret, esoteric practices and rituals are probably going to be fairly normal for groups like these. But these rituals, rules and practices are going to be based on a shared worldview, or at least a shared narrative. Once you have a collection of people that share a perspective, they tend to share goals and a sense of how to achieve them. It's not much of a secret society if one guy is giving the orders and everyone else is following blindly nonetheless. What I'm trying to stress, perhaps unsuccessfully, is that going against a large secret society is not just a battle between our protagonists, a bunch of mooks, or one big boss. It's an ideological opposition, where a collectivized, internalized worldview of the entire organisation faces off against our heroes. A secret society fundamentally needs to have a purpose in its existence and operation, and not just an evil plan either, like detonating every single mobile phone all at once. I feel like I'm going to need to explain this with an example. An organisational worldview has social, political and practical elements. It might, for example, state that all members of a group are the enlightened ones and should all be addressed and respected equally and equivalently because of their enlightened status by at least their peers and hopefully members of every other society in the world. And it might also believe that these enlightened people who are the in-group should be represented in totality across the central government policy, which in practical terms may imply recruitment events for the very, very rich and elite, lobbying, extortion and blackmail to install their enlightened members in positions of power. A plot, on the other hand, which is the distinction I'm trying to draw, might look identical in its practical outcomes. Blackmail, extortion, recruitment galas, but that plot would have a narrow and specific end goal, like getting their glorious leader into a position where they get the nuclear codes. In the former example, where a secret society has a collectivized worldview, each individual can act as an independent agent following their best judgment in achieving their desired world, with the flexibility and responsibility of responding to threats in a way that benefits the goals of the secret society as a whole. The latter example, a plot with its singular focus and defined discrete goal, endpoint, it just can't have its members pivot in the same way to new information or a new way of monopolising power. Say, for example, shifting from political campaigning to overtaking instead board positions in large major companies, at least without the explicit direction of their leader, because their goal is static, and collectively they don't have a worldview to provide a broad philosophical grounding for the sort of actions that are acceptable in pushing their agenda. Thus, by using a worldview model, especially a collectivized one, you don't just make secret societies more dynamic and realistic, you make lower-level henchmen and sub-bosses capable of changing plans, taking initiative, and not giving up their superiors' secrets like, say, a normal criminal henchman, because they've bought into an ideology, a worldview that is bigger than themselves. This degree of independent fanaticism isn't just possible if you decide to make your secret society egalitarian either. Just look at the levels of modern-day Scientology. They're largely discreetly separated by members' willingness and, frankly, their ability to donate money to the church. But you can still be a die-hard adherent of Scientology while being a less well-off member, less able to contribute. But I do still need to talk about the smallest scale of secret society. The kind of group that I made fun of at the start of this video for standing in small ritual rooms in robes chanting forgotten languages. Usually these small-scale secret societies get coded as esotericist cults, and their dark dealings tend to get discovered as soon as their activities start to affect the everyday lives of everyday people. But the primary tenet of a secret society at a very small scale just simply cannot be the achievement of some grand plot, or the realization of a shared worldview. A local secret society must necessarily be composed of local people. And no matter how grand or broad their goal may be, the maintenance of their secret society's boundaries and secrecy must be the most important factor in all of their activities. Let's take as our example a clandestine coalition of merchants and city officials seeking to establish a monopoly on local trade through intimidation, subtle policy changes and price fixing. The broad aim of such an organisation to monopolise this particular industry requires their members to stay local and stay undetected for any benefit to be gained for said members. Getting run out of town by being discovered is a worst case scenario for them, as not only do they lose access to their secret society, but also to the wealth, resources and community goodwill that afforded them that power in the first place. The smaller your organisation, the less chance you have of being whisked away and starting your life elsewhere with a bit of a leg up from your secret society, which would be far more possible if you were in an international organisation that could set you up somewhere new and had the resources to do that and the willingness to do that if you've been burned. Basically, especially small-scale secret societies just, in my book, aren't secretive enough. This is going to sound dumb as a closing point, but I'm really serious here. Don't keep your robes in your wardrobe at home. Leave them at your meeting location if you absolutely need to use robes. Don't all meet at once, exposing your entire social circle. Instead, have small, believable groups of people who share professions or some interests meet, and have the people who overlap in those groups report amongst these social circles. Only accept members by a stringent process, and never accept people who are unknown or strange to you or new in town. Speaking of, you might want to couch the more socially acceptable parts of your worldview into a less extreme version of your secret social organisation as a community goodwill group, which can, to some extent, act as a feeder organisation to your main, more extreme secret society. This broader, more acceptable and palatable version of your organisation's goals has the added bonus of making those views slightly more acceptable in the broader consensus of the people around you. You know, gradually and insidiously. These are all tactics borrowed straight from the playbook of extremist groups of all kinds, by the way. And for the love of all that is sensible, please come up with proper procedures for dealing with grievances and disagreements within your secret society. Otherwise, someone's going to want to leave and start their own splinter group, and maybe even start talking, or they want to leave it in entirety, and then you have to deal with that. You also need to have plausible explanations for any resources you may be using. Someone has to make those lovely velvet cloaks and candles, you know? Running a secret society, especially at a small scale, only works if you have a handle on your bureaucracy. The more glamorous or showy, the more secret entrances, the more velvet robes you have, the more questions you may need to answer, and the greater risk you and your co-conspirators are taking on. Secret societies should be boring, humdrum, and filled with practical bureaucratic measures to resolve disagreements before they spill out of the organisation and expose everything. Running a secret organisation should almost never be exciting or sexy, because then you're doing it wrong. So if you plan to use a secret society as a plot point or a story conceit or in a TTRPG game, remember this. Bureaucracy and secrecy trump pomp and circumstance. All members should share a broad worldview, not a singular plot. And if a secret society gets big enough under these principles, it's already won. The best you can hope for in resistance against a secret society that's big enough is a poignant, poetic struggle. Because any secret society that has lasted a significant time or amassed a significant following will have done so for some time after the big boss has gone, after power has been decentralised and turned into routine rituals and bureaucracy, at which point any secret society worth its salt is going to have its own in-house velvet cloak manufacturer. Engaging as an active member of any society requires social effort, mundane work, and adherence to the broad morals, motivations, and worldview of said society. Civic engagement just isn't often exciting or a place where individual heroism gets shown off. It's an acceptance of your position as a constituent part of progress or reform, and it works. I'm not trying to present here a picture of doom and gloom that oppressive figures or forces or shadowy organisations cannot be bested, but they are bested by consistent effort in broad society by all sorts of people doing all sorts of boring crap. All of this goes doubly for a participant in a secret society, where broad recognition by everyone in your life is actively counter to the point. And if you want to experience being part of a vast machine leading towards a broad ideal of progress as part of actually the small team who can actively make a change or act in a heroic sense, then please do check out Enclave, this video's sponsor. It's a really deserving project, and it may well be the best way to introduce skeptical folks to TTRPGs, as it can handle any genre, any setting, and you can start playing in minutes. Again, Kickstarter link is in the description and the pinned comment. But with all that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the thegrungeonmaster. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.